Imagine waking up in the middle of the desert in total darkness, lying on King Tutankhamun's folding bed with a strange Roman Swiss army knife in your pocket. The hypnotic sound of a giant wheel creaking in the distance. But there was no amusement park at all. They were the Norias of Hama spinning in the pitch black, pulling water from a river no one could see, while in the sky an impossible clock from way over in Prague seemed to mark not the hours, but your lifetime. Beside you, a gigantic footprint in the sand, too big for any normal human, pointed in the direction of a freezing construction in the middle of the heat. An ancient Persian freezer that held secrets that never melted. On the walls, symbols engraved in Wootz steel shone like blades ready for war, and someone, somewhere nearby, was spinning a poison ring on their fingers, waiting for the right moment to use it. None of this was fantasy. All of this truly existed. Today we are going back in time to face inventions so advanced, so ahead of the curve that they seem like lies. If you think you've seen it all, stay until the end and tell me in the comments. Which of these ancient ideas would you be absolutely sure was impossible if you didn't know that archaeology proved otherwise? It's a pleasure. I'm Bertil Barbosa and you are on the Refugio TV channel. Let's go. The giant Norias of Hama look a lot like the type of Ferris wheel you might see at an amusement park, but they are much older and more impressive than a simple park ride. Instead of being a ride, it is a water wheel. What makes it unusual is that watermill wheels did not become popular until the 16th century. These water wheels were built in Syria 2,500 years ago. To say they were a bit ahead of their time would be a huge understatement. 17 of the wheels are still standing there today, although there were more before the civil war and unrest ravaged the region. It is possible they are even older than 2,500 years. We know they existed in the year 469 before Christ because they are referenced in a mosaic in the city of Apamea that was created in that year. But there is nothing to say that they weren't already old at that time. This invention gave the people of Hama safe, fresh water to drink in an era when the concept of irrigation didn't even exist in many of the neighboring territories. They are so old that no one knows who invented them or where they got the idea. As the High Middle Ages were coming to an end, fields like science and technology were advancing at a pace humanity had not yet seen. Mechanical clocks had already existed for some time, but a master craftsman in Prague wanted to go further. He did this by building the Prague astronomical clock in 1410. The machine turned out so impressive that its origin ended up surrounded by myths and legends. The most famous one told that the clock had been created by a man named Janus. The Prague City Council was allegedly so pleased with the result, and at the same time so afraid of losing the exclusivity to another city, that they ordered him to be blinded so he could never repeat the work. Almost certainly that part of the story was not true, yet the clock remained stunning. It tracked the movement of various celestial bodies, marked the hours in both the ancient Czech system and the Central European Standard, and displayed a zodiacal circle used for astrology. Around the dial, several automatons moved at specific times of the day, showing the technology of the era at its peak, a work that still fascinates tourists, locals, the curious, and scholars today. In many ancient cultures around the world, people swore that giants existed. Reports about enormous humans appeared in various ancient documents, including sacred texts like the Bible. But was there any truth to these ancient accounts? From time to time, photos of giants appear, circulating rapidly through online social networks. Generally, the proof shown was an absurd footprint, too large for any ordinary person, or perhaps a skeleton unearthed that seemed much larger than the normal size of a living human being of the era. Of course, many of these images were montages. Since editing programs appeared, no one could fully trust photographs anymore. But could they all be fake? Was there any chance that at least some were true? Scientists stated that no, although careful studies of the most impressive photos showed no clear indication of montage there. According to the Bible, these giants that supposedly lived on Earth were called Nephilim. Could some photos display skeletons of these Nephilim, or was it all just an infinite sequence of well-planned frauds? No one could guarantee anything fully, yet the simple possibility left many people intrigued. When the first modern space rocket was launched and tore through the sky in the 20th century, all of humanity was left open-mouthed at its own capacity to create incredible machines. We shouldn't have been that surprised, because the idea of a rocket had appeared long before that historic moment. A pioneering rocket sketch appeared in a document known as the Sibiu manuscript, prepared by a military engineer from Transylvania named Conrad Haas in the 16th century. This manuscript was rediscovered in Romania in 1961. There, Haas described the design of an artifact he christened the Flying Lance, powered by liquid fuel and equipped with delta-shaped fins to maintain stability during flight. Military chiefs asked him to study how to combine weapons and fireworks. He delivered exactly what they wanted, but his superiors, for unknown reasons, left the proposal forgotten on a shelf. If they had taken it seriously, perhaps the space race would have started 500 years earlier. Just imagine if cities on Mars already existed today thanks to Conrad Haas, completely changing the history of human space exploration. At the bottom of a dig long forgotten by time, archaeologist Lucas believed he was simply standing before another ordinary site. But when he removed the final layer of sand, something colossal emerged. Parts of a gigantic suit of armor, carved from stone yet featuring mechanical details impossible for any known civilization. The helmet, cracked and imposing, seemed to stare back at him. The air grew heavy. Lucas felt he hadn't just found an artifact, he had awakened a lost story. The structure resembled a fallen guardian, a sentinel from an age that never made it into the history books. He touched the cold surface of the stone rib and heard a deep echo, as if the earth itself were answering. He knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. This discovery could rewrite the origin of humanity, or unleash something that should have remained buried forever. What do you think about this discovery? Tell us in the comments. The Swiss Army knife is any adventurer's best friend. If you are going to face a few days in the bush, camping far from everything, it would be crazy not to take one with you. But should we really give the Swiss the credit for inventing this famous multi-use tool? Maybe not. A kind of Roman Swiss Army knife appeared in archaeological excavations on the Mediterranean coast in 2019. It was produced in the 3rd century and featured in a single object, a toothpick, spatula, fork, spoon, and knife. Everything indicates it served to prepare and then eat small meals. The knife was made of silver, which suggests the owner was someone important. And since only one example of this type was found, it is quite possible that the person carrying the piece was also the one who created it. We will never know for sure, but we know that the Swiss Army knife would only be invented about 1,500 years after this anonymous Roman assembled his pocket meal kit. Why didn't the idea catch on at the time? It's hard not to be curious, right? Even until the end. Having a type of resistant and reliable steel to manufacture weapons was quite fundamental in the Middle Ages. If your swords were more resistant than the enemy's, you held a clear, real advantage on the battlefield there. Damascus blades were considered the best in the world because they were produced with ancient, high-quality Wootz steel. This Wootz steel was already quite old at that time, however. It is a type of crucible steel that was created in India thousands of years ago, long before various other cultures understood even the basics of how to produce it. No one knows for sure when it was invented, but it appears in the records of the campaigns of Alexander the Great about 2,400 years ago. A production center for this material from the same era was found in Tamil Nadu. It is believed that the Indians never taught anyone how to produce this steel, but they happily sold ingots to any buyer, for every expensive bar, including to the powerful Roman Empire. Damascus blades made with Wootz steel were still in high demand in the 17th century. Until the invention of firearms, the best weapons in the world continued to be produced following an Indian recipe much older than the time of Christ. Human beings have always enjoyed wearing jewelry. Rings are among the most common archaeological finds made at ancient sites, and the oldest known examples were created more than 10,000 years ago. This ring isn't quite that old, but it is quite unique and frighteningly evil. It is a Bulgarian ring from the 14th century, found in an ancient medieval fortress at the famous Cape Kaliakra in 2012. In the center of the ring, there is a small hole there which would normally serve to hold a precious stone. There is no stone in this ring, however. Instead, there is a small cavity to hold a few drops of deadly poison. The content of the ring could be poured into an enemy's food or drink without them knowing. Since the fortress was the home of the local aristocracy during the medieval era, it likely served in very discreet political assassinations there. There was a wave of these crimes in the 14th century, and discreet weapons like this may have had a direct relation to them. It is more the type of gadget you would imagine seeing with James Bond than with a Bulgarian assassin from the 14th century, and yet it existed. The freezer is an incredible invention. It reduces food waste and guarantees that we can always have a cold treat on a hot day. If you think the invention of the freezer required the invention of electricity to come before it, however, you are very mistaken. Freezers existed in ancient times. They just had a very different name. Go back in time to Persia 2,400 years ago and you will find yakchals in the desert. The name, loosely translated, means ice pit, but that is an imprecise description of the structure. It is not a pit. It is more like a man-made hill. The average yakchal would be 60 feet tall and quite sophisticated. Water from nearby springs was channeled to the yakchals and then cooled using wind catchers, while an evaporation-based cooling system dispensed any excess heat and humidity. The exterior of the mounds was lined with goat hair, clay, sand, and egg whites to reflect the sun's heat and ensure the contents stayed cooled. It is a very efficient invention that is still used today in some rural communities. Most of you are probably used to the concept of a throwing knife, but perhaps you have never seen one that looks like this before. It is a traditional weapon from Central Africa called a kepinga or kubinga. In design, it falls between a dagger and a ninja star of the type Japanese warriors like to use. No one is absolutely sure who created the design, but it is most commonly attributed to the Azande tribe of Ethiopia. They were famous for their advanced military tactics and prowess on the battlefield, so it would make sense that they had weapons their opponents were not familiar with. It dates back to the Iron Age, with the oldest surviving example believed to have been made just over 2,700 years ago. Although it may look a bit strange, modern replicas have been built and tested, demonstrating that the weapons are effective thrown overhand or sideways at distances of up to 120 feet. The pattern of the blades and the distance between them are calculated to cause the most damage upon impact. Getting them back after they had been thrown might have been a challenge, however. King Tutankhamun may not have been the most important pharaoh of ancient Egypt, but he is one of the ones we know the most thanks to the famous discovery of his intact tomb by Howard Carter, back in the 1920s or 1920s. To this day, we are still discovering new details about him, including the possibility that he spent several nights sleeping there on the world's first folding camping bed. Folding beds like this are common in stores like IKEA today, but they must have seemed like a technological marvel 3,300 years ago. Archaeologists counted 5 beds inside his tomb when it was opened, but this one was quite different. It is smaller, sits closer to the ground there, and was made with 3 separate moving parts, which could be folded into a Z shape. Exactly why the most important man in Egypt would need this simple convenience is unknown. He was quite young when he died, however, so perhaps he still liked to invite friends over for his little sleepover parties. Other 2-part folding beds have been found in Egyptian tombs, but King Tutankhamun's 3-part folding bed remains the only one of this type found so far. About 2,300 years ago, King Philip II of Macedon commissioned the Philippios Krini fountain. The name can be translated as Philip's Fountain, so we imagine he liked it so much that he put his own name there. It is the oldest hydraulic structure in the world that still remains in operation currently. It might look a bit worn and battered by time, but it continues to work perfectly well. Instead of being merely decorative or recreational, Philip ordered the temporary fountain to be erected to provide water to the soldiers camped there in Nestani before a war with Amphissa. In the heart of the fountain, there is an Archimedes screw pump that pushes water through pipes coming out of the spring, which in itself represents a truly remarkable ancient invention. Other fountains certainly existed at that time, and this one may not even have been the only one in the region. Even so, it is impressive that a device created as a temporary solution for thirsty soldiers has survived for more than 2,000 years. It needs periodic repairs and will require constant maintenance work in the future, but the basic mechanisms haven't changed since the day it was built. Today we know that the ancient Egyptians were much more advanced than other cultures of their time when the subject was medicine and surgery, but it is rare to find a more impressive example of this than this prosthetic toe. It was found in a tomb in the Sheikh Abd al-Qurna necropolis in Luxor, but it didn't belong to him. Instead, it seems to have been made for the daughter of a priest named Tabakatenmut. Archaeologists believe the object is approximately 3,000 years old. A detailed analysis of the wooden piece showed that it was molded, sanded, and redesigned several times, likely to achieve an increasingly better real fit for the owner. This suggests it was created first for her when she was quite young and then adjusted over the years, keeping up with the slow growth of the entire body. The Egyptians believed that life after death was almost a perfect utopia, so they considered it essential to arrive there with all body parts preserved, ready for the great spiritual journey. Even so, this toe prosthesis was comfortable and practical to use while the owner was still living. Few people would have the money to pay for such a resource, but it is impressive to know that someone ancient managed to produce such a sophisticated solution back then. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and follow the new videos always right here. And as always, stay curious. See you next time.